On this episode of China Uncensored, how the Chinese regime is using the Czech Republic to infiltrate the rest of Europe. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. The Czech Republic, home to the world's highest per capita beer consumption and the world's best/worst pun-based t-shirts. The Czech Republic is also the most successful post-communist country in Central Europe. Unlike some other post-Soviet nations, the Czech Republic, or Czechia as nobody calls it, has a vibrant growing economy. And let's be real, the Czech people never liked the Soviets anyway. Back in 1968, when the Soviets tried to crush the budding liberalization movement, the people resisted. It took more than 2 decades, but finally, they got rid of communist rule altogether. The good news is, all that is history. The bad news is, no one ever learns from history. Which is why we now go to Prague, where our friend Simon Whistler from the YouTube channel VisualPolitik has more.
Thank you, Chris. Here in the Czech Republic, China's influence has grown considerably in the last few years. This may seem a bit surprising given the Czech Republic's traditional anti-communist stance. This is the Czech Republic's first president after communism, Václav Havel, seen here having a beer, of course. He was outspoken against the Chinese Communist Party's human rights violations, but the situation seems to have changed with the newest president, Miloš Zeman. He took office in 2013, and he's a big fan of Chinese leader Xi Jinping. You could say he might even be the president of Xi Jinping's fan club. Wait, that would actually be Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. Zeman, though, could probably be the vice president of the fan club. He's met Xi Jinping 6 times in just 3 years. In 2014, Zeman became the first Czech president to visit China in a decade. Here, he is at a ceremony marking the anniversary of Sino-Czech relations, which was also the debut of China's newest military innovation, the Stepford soldiers. Although I do think I prefer the original to the knockoff.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Claire.
Anyway, in 2015, President Zeman visited China again.
The only Western leader to attend a massive military parade in Beijing, marking the 70th anniversary since the end of World War II.
A parade celebrated with giant weapons and more Stepford soldiers. Then, in 2016, just to mix it up, President Zeman invited Chinese leader Xi Jinping to check out his hometown. But just 10 days ahead of Xi's arrival, Zeman faced a bit of a problem.
Around 1,000 people welcomed the Dalai Lama to the Czech Republic, with a gathering outside Prague Castle, the seat of the Czech president.
Yes, the Dalai Lama came to Prague to spread his message of peace and compassion, like a Nazi, at least according to Chinese officials. Now, President Zeman was afraid that simply ignoring the Dalai Lama wouldn't be enough to please Xi Jinping, so he took it a step further and allegedly actively punished a Czech official who met with the Dalai Lama. There was a lot on the agenda for the two leaders' exciting 3-day party, at least according to Chinese state-run media.
Both nations hope to increase bilateral ties in areas such as trade, infrastructure, finance and cultural exchange.
The cultural exchange evidently does not include the Stepford soldier upgrade option. Zeman may have rolled out the red carpet for Xi Jinping, literally. But a lot of people in the Czech Republic were not very pleased with the visit, like the former foreign affairs minister who said, "This is a shame to our republic. We have invited a dictator to the same place where our founding fathers were." But since the visit, Chinese companies and tourists have been pouring into the Czech Republic. Bank of China has even set up a branch in Prague. And then the Czech Republic announced it would invest more than $200 million with the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China in a special funds for projects in Central and Eastern Europe. So what does the Czech Republic get in return? Well, it signed a bunch of deals with Chinese companies. Zeman said he expected China to invest $4 billion in the Czech Republic. But it's been more than a year, and it seems like most of those companies are not exactly keeping their promises. At least Chinese communist money is saving local football or something. But there's more to this story. Zeman has said that he wants his country to become the entry gate for China into the EU. Chinese airlines now provide direct flights to Prague from 3 Chinese cities, and there's a new 7,000-mile freight train service to Prague that starts in China's Hubei province. President Zeman is also a superfan of China's One Belt, One Road initiative, a plan to expand Chinese trade and build Chinese infrastructure projects in dozens of countries. In addition, the Czech Republic is also a figurative entry gate for China into the European Union. Zeman has said that the Czech Republic will fully utilize its influence to help further boost China's relations with the EU and Central and Eastern European countries. The Chinese Communist Party has wanted to infiltrate the European Union for a long time, and now's its chance. You see, as a whole, the EU is strong enough to stand up to China as a trading bloc, like when they rejected signing the One Belt, One Road statement. The EU's concern was that One Belt, One Road wasn't transparent enough and that it would too heavily favour China over other participants. One EU diplomat commented, apparently to Chinese surprise, the EU was united on this. And even worse, from the Chinese Communist Party's perspective, the EU has also publicly called out China's human rights atrocities. So instead of facing off with the EU, China's leadership would rather deal with individual European countries that they could more easily influence, like what they're doing with the Czech Republic. And then these individual countries can advocate for China's interests within the EU, making it hard for the EU to unite against China. And now that Brexit is weakening the EU, this is a great opportunity for the Chinese Communist Party to implement their strategy. Sounds paranoid, you might say. Well, China's leaders have already done this exact same thing closer to home with ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. China has territorial disputes in the South China Sea with about half of the ASEAN nations. But despite years of trying, ASEAN has never fully stood up to China about the disputes, even as the Chinese Communist Party builds artificial islands and militarizes them. The reason? Well, for years, the Chinese Communist Party have been successfully dividing and conquering ASEAN, and they did it by befriending one of its member states, Cambodia, using foreign aid and investment. And then Cambodia, in return, blocks anything ASEAN could do that would be bad for China. Sounds awfully familiar now, doesn't it? The good news is that the EU is almost 3 times the size of ASEAN, so the Chinese Communist Party can't influence it with the Czech Republic alone. But it's certainly a good place to start. And now, back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Simon. I guess President Zeman had better check himself before he wrecks himself. Or the EU. And if you like this episode, check out more from Simon Whistler on the YouTube channel VisualPolitik. He talks about politics and economics around the world. Plus, you can go to VisualPolitik right now and check out the other video I did with Simon. It's about the relationship between China and North Korea. So click here or the link below. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.